Hey everyone, Rifki Stern here, head of podcasts at Unpacked. Right now, young people are navigating one of the most confusing and emotionally charged moments in recent history. They're surrounded by misinformation, polarization, and oversimplified narratives about Israel and the Jewish experience. That's the challenge. At Unpacked, we're stepping in with nuance, depth, and clarity. And this year alone, our podcasts have been downloaded millions of times. That's part of the solution that we're building together. But to keep creating this type of content and to grow it in 2026, we need your help. We've launched a crowdfunding campaign, and if these conversations have mattered to you, we'd be so grateful for your support. Head to unpacked.bio/podgift2025 or click the link in the show notes. That's unpacked.bio/PODgift2025. Thank you for being part of our Unpacked community.
Hey friends, before we get into the episode, I want to ask you for a quick favor. You know that this show is really a conversation with you, not just at you. And to keep making Unpacking Israeli History the best it can be, I genuinely need to hear from you. What you're loving, what you're not loving so much. What you wish we would just say, hey, let's do this a little bit differently now. It's a super short survey, truly 2 minutes, but your answers help us shape where the show goes next. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to unpacked.bio/UIH survey. Again, that's unpacked.bio/UIH survey. Thanks for listening, for thinking with me, and for being part of this incredible community. Hey, I'm Noam Weissman, and this is Unpacking Israeli History, the podcast that takes a deep dive into some of the most intense, historically fascinating, and often misunderstood events and stories linked to Israeli history. This episode of Unpacking Israeli History is a re-release of an episode from a few years back, and it was generously sponsored by my amazing parents, Ima and Abba, or Neil and Pam Weissman. To sponsor an episode of Unpacking Israeli History, just to say what's up, be in touch at Noam at unpacked.media. Before we start, as always, check us out on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, all the places. Just search Unpacking Israeli History and hit the follow or subscribe button. That's all you have to do. Anyway, okay? Yalla, let's do this.
אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. היא מדינת ישראל.
We, the people of Israel, are prepared and anxious to meet the representatives of our neighbors without any preconditions.
There are people in Israel and elsewhere say it's impossible to make peace between the Arabs and Israel or the Jewish people. I think they are wrong.
In recording almost 200 episodes of Unpacking Israeli History so far, there's only one time I lost control and cried. Actually cried while recording. It was once. It happened once. I remember my producer, Rifki Stern, just sitting there waiting patiently. She probably was a bit unsure of what to do. Get it together, Noam. No, she didn't say that. Instead, she just let me go. Why? What about the story of Ma'alot caused me to lose my ability to be a, quote, objective storyteller, just sharing the story of Israel, which is how some people perceive me, though I'm not sure I agree with that assessment at all. A story for another time. Anyway, this is a story I've been waiting to reshare for a long time now, like a really long time. We first told the story of Ma'alot a few years ago. When we recorded it, it already felt unbearable. 50 years ago, 115 Israelis, including children, taken hostage, over 25 killed. Leaders arguing over whether you can ever negotiate with terrorists while children are in danger. Again, I lost it. I lost it telling the story. And then October 7th happened. Ma'alot never felt like a distant, tragic chapter in a history book. But when the 7th of October happened, when children were again taken hostage, it started to feel like too much of a feature of Jewish history. It started to feel like part of the same story we're still living in. In 2025, children were targeted because they are Jews, because they are Israelis, because they are symbols in someone else's war. And it feels too present. We found ourselves again arguing in cabinet rooms, at Shabbat tables, in classrooms about what should happen, what should have happened, red lines, deals, deterrence, dignity, all of these words. And this is why I want to re-release this episode now. Because Ma'alot, a story from 50 years ago, forces all of us to stare straight at a set of questions that keep coming back generation after generation. What does a country do when its children are in the hands of people who see them not as kids, but as leverage, not as humans, but as collateral? What do we expect from all of our leaders in those impossible minutes when every option is bad and terrible and there's no good choice? There's no good choice. How do you keep sending your own kids on trips to school, to life, after you've seen what can happen in 30 seconds? And there's another reason I wanted to tell the story again. If you listen closely, and pay close attention, please, the Ma'alot story explodes a lot of the lazy cliches that we still hear about this Arab-Israeli, Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The terrorists here weren't just faceless outsiders. Two of them were Israeli Arabs, Arab citizens of Israel who spoke Hebrew, knew the landscape, knew the people. They came in the name of this lofty, Marxist, quote-unquote, democratic vision, and then they murdered Jewish and Arab civilians, including children, in cold blood. So when people in 2025 talk about, quote, resistance in these abstract, romantic terms, Ma'alot kind of drags the conversation back to reality. This is what it actually looks like when you turn kids into bargaining chips. And yet, this isn't only a story about horror and failure. It's also a story about what Jews did next, about communities who decided that their response to murdered teenagers would not be to disappear, but to double down on Jewish life. So as you listen, I want to invite you to hold two timelines in your head at once. On the one hand, 1974 bruised Israel just after the Yom Kippur War or the Ramadan War, whatever it's called in your communities in 1973, still figuring out what kind of country it's going to be. On the other hand, 2025, and Israel and the Jewish world reeling from a different trauma, still asking many of the same questions. What do we demand of our leaders? What do we owe our children? And what does it mean to constantly keep choosing life and meaning and purpose in a story that sometimes feels like it's trying to break us? With that in mind, let's go to Ma'alot and let's bring about a future in which we never have to tell stories like this again. 30 seconds can either sound like no time at all or a ton of time. It's only 30 seconds. That's like half a minute, technically. But 30 seconds was all it took to devastate a nation. In under a minute, Palestinian terrorists killed 22 Israeli teenagers held hostage in a school as their parents and the defense minister waited helplessly outside. It was the worst attack on Israeli soil to date, a failure for the elite Sayeret Matkal unit that had been dispatched to rescue the hostages, an embarrassment for the Prime Minister Golda Meir less than a year after the embarrassment of the Yom Kippur War, and a shocking blow to the entire country. 22 Jewish children killed in the name of the state that was created to keep them safe. Was this the price of the Zionist dream? We talk a lot about pain on the show. Yes, Israeli history is rich and gorgeous and in many ways miraculous, but it's also heartbreaking. I have to say, this is one of the most difficult for me to tell. I want to warn you that this episode might be difficult to listen to, but it's also critically important. In the wee hours of May 13th, 1974, 3 men crossed into Israel from Lebanon loaded with machine guns, hand grenades, and explosives. Depending on who you ask, they were dressed as either IDF soldiers or Israeli police. Their victims were meant to feel safe until they didn't. All 3 men were members of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because you're thinking of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a different terrorist group. But the DFLP were Marxists, whose stated aim was the formation of a single Palestinian state against all forms of class subjugation, where Arabs and Jews have the right to develop their national culture while being hostile to colonialism, imperialism, Zionism, and Arab-Palestinian reaction. Their rosy vision of a single, peaceful, democratic state may have been more convincing if their tactics didn't include murdering kids. Okay, Noam, I hear you saying, this is a cute crash course on Palestinian ideology, but let's get serious. Who cares what group they are part of or what they believed in? It's a fair question. Honestly, I think it both does and doesn't matter, because on the one hand, the end result is the same. Innocent people being targeted, used, and murdered. On the other, I think it's important to understand the vast ideological differences between different Palestinian groups. From the start, Palestinians were ideologically fractured, splinter group after splinter group making their own demands and having their own brands. And that, I think, is a big part of why we still don't have peace. They still have not had their Altalena moment. If you don't know what I'm referring to, what are you waiting for? Check out our episode on the Altalena. On the Palestinian side, there's still no one strong enough or influential enough to make peace with. But their Marxism wasn't the most interesting thing about these guys. No. The most interesting and horrifying thing about them was this. 2 of the 3 were Israeli Arabs from Haifa, and at least one knew the north of Israel well. He had lived for a time in the northern Arab-Israeli village of Taiba and even worked at a restaurant in Tzfat. You know, I believe that it's really hard to hate someone once you know them, once you've experienced their culture or learned their language. But these guys, I don't know, they're the exception. 2 were Israeli. They spoke Hebrew. They knew Jews. And still, they were able to murder both Jews and Arabs without hesitating. All in the name of building a democratic, binational state. Lovely. So back to May 13th, 1974. The 3 men spent all of the previous day hiding in a cave. They moved only under cover of night, heading toward Ma'alot, a so-called development town, 6 miles from the Lebanese border. Most of the town's Jewish residents were poor North African immigrants, raising first-generation Israeli children in a Jewish state. But the terrorist's first victims were not Jews. They were Arabs. At 1:45 midnight just before May 13th bled into May 14th, Israel's 26th Independence Day, a small truck made its way up the road where the terrorists lurked. Inside were 8 Arabs, a male driver, and 7 women on their way back from work. And actually, women is not the right word, because 3 of the passengers were teenagers, kids. The terrorists flagged down the truck, but the driver didn't stop. So they opened fire, killing 1 woman and injuring every other person in the truck. The Israeli authorities called to the scene thought that this was the attack, that the terrorists had completed their mission, so they centered their search efforts near the border to catch the terrorists before they made it back to Lebanon. They didn't realize that the shooting was just part 1, a small-scale, hideous rehearsal before the main event. The 3 terrorists reached Ma'alot at 2:30 a.m., where a single light burned in the window of a small apartment building. This was the home of Yosef and Fortuna Cohen and their 3 young children. Fortuna was heavily pregnant with their 4th. As the terrorists stomped through the building looking for victims, Yosef opened the door. He was killed instantly in a hail of bullets, providing just enough time for Fortuna to hide their deaf, mute, 16-month-old son Yitzchak, knowing he couldn't cry out. Her 4- and 5-year-old were not as lucky. They must have heard the shots that killed their father. They must have cried and screamed as they too were shot along with their mother and unborn sibling. Of the entire Cohen family, only 5-year-old Bia and baby Yitzchak survived. But the night wasn't over for the 3 terrorists. They had a 3rd mission to complete. They were looking for a school. As they fled the Cohen's building in the early hours of the morning, they came across a local janitor. Remember, they were dressed as either IDF soldiers or Israeli police, and they spoke fluent Hebrew. He had no reason to be suspicious when they asked him for directions to the school. Not until they shot him and left him for dead. The Nativ Meir Elementary School should have been empty at 3:30 in the morning of Israel's 26th Independence Day, but it wasn't. Between 100 and 115 students from a religious school in Tzfat, along with a few teachers, were bunking down there as part of an overnight field trip. Boys on the first floor, girls on the second. They shouldn't have been up there at all, according to the students. They were supposed to sleep outside, under the stars. But the northern part of the country was on high alert, so the students and their teachers had been diverted at the last moment from their original route and asked to bunk down somewhere safer. What a hideous, ugly irony. Here's one of the teachers describing their ordeal for the Israeli media. At first, I didn't know what to do. It was a matter of seconds. I pounded on the door. It opened. I ran towards the window and said, "Everyone after me. Jump out the window." The boys on the first floor were lucky. It was easier for them to escape. Many of the teachers, terrified, jumped with them. But not everyone managed to flee. 85 students, 2 teachers, and a medic remained in the building with the 3 terrorists. The terrorists herded everyone into a classroom, which they booby-trapped, surrounding their hostages with explosives. Here's how survivor Shula Binyamin Rubin describes the next 16 hours. They made everyone sit in the classroom, 80-something kids, and we waited. They didn't let us talk. They didn't let us go to the bathroom at first. But after that, each time, they'd take 3 kids and put them toward a window in the corridor. They'd shoot between our feet, so we'd cry and scream to the government, or to whomever was responsible for freeing the prisoners they wanted. The terrorists sent out a student with their demands. Israel would release between 20 and 26 terrorists being held as prisoners by 6 p.m., or else they'd blow up the school with everyone in it. To make matters even worse, the Israeli government was in something of a shambles. Prime Minister Golda Meir had resigned a month prior, profoundly disheartened by the failure of the Yom Kippur War and Israel's subsequent economic downturn. Israeli law dictated that her cabinet was forced to resign with her. The new government wasn't poised to take power until June, so the decision rested on a prime minister and a cabinet who knew they were on their way out. Every person in Golda's government was acutely conscious of their legacy. Do they want to be the government who let terrorists kill children? On the other hand, do they want to be the government that gave in to terrorist demands? The 76-year-old prime minister was actually willing to negotiate, insisting that one doesn't wage war on the backs of children. But her defense minister, legendary war hero Moshe Dayan, disagreed. The only way out of the situation, he argued, was to kill the terrorists and save the students. For Dayan, Israel would never be a weak country that bowed to terrorist demands. The cabinet debated for 14 hours. All the while, the students waited, knowing that any moment could be their last. Eventually, the Knesset agreed to the demands. They even brought 20 prisoners to the scene blindfolded and bound as though to prove they were serious. By some accounts, this is when the terrorists started dismantling the explosives. The students, though still terrified, breathed a sigh of relief. Soon their ordeal would be over. Soon they would get to go home. But as the Knesset negotiated with the 3 terrorists, the army's most elite unit was preparing to storm the building. You might remember Sayeret Matkal from our episode on the Mossad last season. If you don't, go back and take a listen. The super elite commando unit had been around for less than 20 years, and yet their exploits were already the stuff of legend. Only a year before, they'd sneaked into Beirut, dressed in drag no less, and taken down several heads of the PLO. They were confident that they'd be able to storm a school, eliminate 3 terrorists, and save the hostages. They were wrong. 15 minutes before the 6 p.m. deadline, Sayeret Matkal made their way into the school from 2 separate entrances. A team of snipers watched their backs, ready to take out the terrorists. Tactically, it seemed like a good plan, but things went wrong almost immediately. The first team, which went in through the front doors, immediately took a volley of gunfire, and rather than engage in a protracted firefight, they threw a phosphorus grenade. Sounds efficient, right? But here's the thing about phosphorus grenades. In addition to burning their victims, they create a lot of smoke. Smoke that blinded the IDF snipers and the 2nd Sayeret Matkal team as they combed the school for the hostages. Blinded by this smoke, they went to the wrong floor. Worst of all, the snipers couldn't get a clear line on the terrorists. It took 30 seconds, maybe less, for the IDF to realize its mistake. But that 30 seconds was enough time for the DFLP. "You're going home now," one of the terrorists reportedly said to the students. Then they opened fire. A hail of bullets, a clutch of grenades. In 30 seconds, 26 people, 22 of them students under the age of 17, were dead. Here's Shula Binyamin Rubin again. A lot of kids died. A lot were wounded. Whoever was able, we climbed on top of the bodies and jumped out the window and ran toward the soldiers if we could. Whoever couldn't was evacuated to a hospital. Sayeret Matkal eventually made their way to the right classroom, where they killed the terrorists. The sight that greeted them was like something out of a nightmare. A news broadcast from the next day described the scene. Broken furniture mingled with pieces of clothing, large bloodstains, cans of food and loaves of bread, a reminder of the trip that never finished. A silent witness to the drama that took place here. Then principal of the school, Shalom Ma'arti, described it like this. The whole classroom was full of blood. They threw grenades at them. There was hair stuck to the walls, the girls' hair. We had to scrape it off the walls. It was horrible. Equally horrible were the funerals of the next day. 26 caskets, most holding children. Parents and relatives wailing, collapsing onto the earth.
Hysterical relatives had to be restrained or comforted by the police. A group of demonstrators calling for the death penalty for terrorists and urging revenge surrounded the president and the deputy prime minister. Troops and bodyguards had to move in to protect them, and the chief rabbi was led away.
Because how do you respond to something like this? How do you recover? It's been nearly 50 years and still the wound hasn't healed. Not for the families of the dead and not for the survivors whose trauma haunts them to this day. The global Jewish community was shocked. 10,000 people protested in New York, some even chaining themselves to the fence surrounding UN headquarters. A few even beat up the chairman of the Action Committee on American-Arab Relations who happened to be passing by. But other communities chose a different path. You've probably heard of Chabad, also known as the Lubavitch Hasidim. In the wake of Ma'alot, the Lubavitcher Rebbe called on his community to step up their efforts to bring world Jewry closer to Judaism. Rabbi Yosef Hech was there on the first Shabbat after the massacre at Ma'alot.
That Shabbat, I remember the Rebbe coming into the Farbrengen. His face was awesome. The Rebbe spoke about bringing the Jewish people to deeper their actions of Torah mitzvahs, especially Mivtza Mezuzah.
A mezuzah is a parchment scroll inked with biblical verses and affixed to the right doorposts of Jewish homes and institutions. Why? Check out the links in the show notes. And in response, the Lubavitch community took up the call. Big time.
He decided to rent vans and go out to the streets with microphones. They would stop in the most busy corners.
And there, young Chabad men would encourage fellow Jews to wrap tefillin or light Shabbat candles or stick mezuzot to their doorposts. Heck, you've probably seen these men around. "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" became their catchphrase. They spent their days doing all they could to bring their fellow Jews just a little bit closer to Jewish ritual, to mitzvot. They called their trucks tanks against assimilation. And to me, this kind of image is strangely beautiful. A tank can maneuver around any obstacle, even an obstacle as big as ignorance, apathy, or assimilation. This was how they responded to the murder of teenagers. Not with violence, not with anger. And it's so hard, but with a renewed commitment to Jewish education and pride. And I like to think that the students who were religious would have approved. Each mitzvah sending the Jewish people a little bit closer to God. So that's the story of Ma'alot. And here are your 5 fast facts. Number 1, Israel approached its 26th birthday in a bit of a quarter-life crisis. The Yom Kippur War had left the country severely shaken. The prime minister resigned in April, but the new government hadn't yet taken control. Number 2, shortly before Israel's Independence Day, 3 men from the DFLP sneaked through the Lebanese border into Israel, heavily armed and disguised as Israeli soldiers or police. 2 of the men were Israelis who spoke fluent Hebrew. Number 3, the 3 men started their killing spree by shooting up a van of Israeli Arabs, killing a 27-year-old woman. But instead of going back to Lebanon, as Israeli police had assumed, they went further into Israel. Their next stop was an apartment block in Ma'alot. There, they killed almost the entire Cohen family, leaving behind a 16-month-old boy and a badly wounded 5-year-old girl, then fled into the night. Number 4, their next stop was an elementary school, where they found over 100 religious high school students and their teachers bunking down as part of a field trip. Though some managed to escape, 85 were taken hostage. The terrorists demanded the release of tens of prisoners, most of them Palestinians. If the government failed to comply, they'd blow up the school with everyone in it. And number 5, Prime Minister Golda Meir was ready to negotiate. She didn't want to be remembered as the prime minister who fought a war on the backs of children. Her defense minister, Moshe Dayan, disagreed, so they split the difference. The government agreed to release the prisoners, but shortly before the deadline, an elite army unit entered the school to rescue the hostages. They failed. In under a minute, the terrorists murdered 22 students and 4 adults, leaving behind a wound that has never fully healed. I've usually got a lesson prepared after the 5 fast facts and say this line, which you've come to know by heart. Those are the facts, but here's one enduring lesson as I see it. But today's lesson isn't from me. It's from 15-year-old Ilana Turgaman, which some sources call Ilana Ne'eman, who was murdered in Ma'alot along with 21 of her classmates. Shortly before her death, she'd written her parents a letter, which I'm going to read you in translation. I don't know if Ilana was born this wise or if her last few harrowing hours on Earth granted her an unusual sensitivity. I do know we can all learn from her final words, no matter how old we are or what our circumstances. Here they are. Dear Mom and Dad, hello. It's 11:25 a.m. and I don't know how many hours I have left to live. So I'm writing to you. I'm sorry, Mom, that I didn't listen to you and went on this trip. Yes, I know you didn't force me to stay, but you were worried and preferred I didn't go. But I went because I knew what I needed to do. I wanted to say thank you for the education you gave me and for the beautiful years I had, all thanks to you. Right now I'm 15 and a half, and if I'm fated to die, I'll die quietly with honor and faith. Yes, faith which you gave me. You always told me that without faith, life is dull and a lot more painful. And now, in these difficult hours, I have a lot of faith, and I also believe you were right. Life doesn't give much to a person. He can't choose much, not when or where he'll be born or to which parents. But I was happy. I was a religious girl in the land of Israel with wonderful parents. I didn't have many hours. I didn't have that privilege, and I guess I won't. But thanks to you, I passed tests of honor, both in the small, dark hours and in the regular, everyday hours. Mom, don't cry too much when I die. When Rivka has her baby, name it after me, Ilan or Ilana. Give the baby the education you gave me, so he'll be strong and know his life's purposes and why he was born. I know your lives were difficult before and after I was born, and that when I die, they'll be even harder. But always remember that the suffering always brought with it hours of joy and satisfaction. I'm not crying, my eyes are dry. It doesn't hurt that I'm going to die, and I'm not sorry. When I say Shema Yisrael in my last hour, I'll think about you. I was supposed to go on this trip. We can't stop living life. The danger lies everywhere, and if heaven makes a decree, it will happen. It's better to live morally and to be killed for the sake of sanctifying God's name. Please give this letter, which will be my last ever, to all our relatives to read and send them my love. Wish all my friends and neighbors the best of luck. This is my last chance. In another hour, I'll leave you. Goodbye forever. With much love, your daughter, Ilana. Ilana, this episode is dedicated to you, and I wanted to make sure that it was not just your relatives who read this letter, but the thousands of people who listen to our podcast. Ilana was killed a few hours after she wrote that letter. Just as she requested, her sister Rivka did name the baby after her. Her nephew Ilan Shohat was Israel's youngest ever mayor, presiding over the city of Tzfat, where his aunt was born and buried. I don't know if he grew up knowing his purpose as Ilana had hoped, but I do know that Ilana was right about one thing. We can't choose our circumstances or how much time we have, but we can choose how we spend our small hours. We can choose to live with honor, even in the darkest moments. So in the words of American poet Mary Oliver, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Whew, that was intense. Thank you all for listening. If you haven't yet, I'm begging you, be in touch with us. I love being in touch with you. Shoot me an email at noam@jewishunpacked.com. Now it's time for our final segment. You know what's coming, Israel Nerd Talk, where we highlight one of you, our amazing listeners. We get the best emails from you guys, and we want to share them with the world. This week, I want to highlight an awesome letter from an awesome listener who asked we don't use his real name, so let's call him Jamil. Here's what Jamil wrote. Hello, Dr. Weissman. Jamil, call me Noam, please. I hope this email reaches you well. I'm one of your dedicated podcast listeners from Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for providing such a wonderful explanation of Israeli and Zionist history for laymen like me. It's truly captivating and provides so much more context that is graspable for all, unlike traditional news outlets. Perhaps I'm not the typical demographic or target audience of Unpacked. I'm an Australian born to Afghan refugees who fled the Soviet invasion. Ever since, Afghanistan has been overrun by jihadist militant groups. In fact, the last Afghan Jew sadly left the country after the Taliban's return to power last August, erasing the country's diversity. Today's new generation of Afghans, both inside the country and in the diaspora, are struggling to connect to their country, culture, and identity. In addition to 4 decades of war misinformation on social media is disseminating polarizing historical narratives revised and simplified to fuel identity politics. I want to challenge the misinformation the way OpenDor Media and Unpacked does through a nuanced and honest approach. Jamil, as soon as I got this email, I knew we had to open season 4 with it because it's so freaking powerful. I was blown away. Who would have thought that an Afghan listener from Sydney, Australia would connect to Israeli history, of all things, and use it as a model for how to teach young Afghans the beauty of their legacy, their culture, their history? Seriously, Jamil, this letter really impacted me, and I thank you. Unpacking Israeli History is a production of Unpacked, an OpenDor Media brand. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you did, I know it was painful, but I hope you appreciated it, leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify. Give us those 5 stars. It's super helpful. It really helps other people find our show, and I really, really appreciate it. One more time, I really love hearing from you. So email me at noam@unpacked.media. This episode was produced by Rifki Stern. Our team for this episode includes Adi Elbaz and Rob Pera. I'm your host, Noam Weissman. Thanks for listening. See you next week.